What would you do if the person you trusted most turned your love into leverage? Tonight's story follows a grandfather who discovers a quiet theft hidden behind polished smiles, forged reports, whispered deals, and a plan to take his freedom along with his home. He won't rage. He will measure. He will document. And he will let the truth do the heavy lifting. If you're into high-stakes betrayal and patient, surgical justice, you're in the right place. This is Cheating Stories 7. Like, comment with your take, and subscribe to stay for every twist. Now, let's step into Caught Cheating. Daughter betrayed me. I turned her greed into justice. Friday evenings had once been Richard Hayes' anchor. A ritual of neat suits, quiet drives, and dinner with his daughter Sophia in her mansion at the edge of Denver. He believed these dinners stitched together what grief had torn apart since Alina, his wife, passed away 2 years earlier. Tonight was no different. Richard stood before the mirror, smoothing the navy tie Alina had given him on their 30th anniversary. It was more than fabric. It was memory, loyalty, a vow he thought still lived inside his daughter's heart. As he adjusted the knot, his phone buzzed. A message from Daniel Ortiz, his lawyer, his friend of 3 decades. "Call me immediately." Richard frowned. Daniel never used that word lightly. He dialed expecting an accident, a health scare, some urgent legal technicality. But Daniel's voice was stripped bare, heavy as stone. "Richard, are you alone?" "Yes, what is it?" "I've been reviewing your estate updates. The quarterly PDF Sophia's been sending you, they are forgeries." For a moment, Richard's mind stalled. He clutched the tie as if it could anchor him. Daniel continued, steady but ruthless. "Olivia Carter, our forensic accountant, ran a trace. Multi-step liquidations. Retirement funds drained. Brokerage accounts funneled into an LLC tied to a failing resort project in Mexico. The mansion, the Porsche, even that stone bracelet on Sophia's wrist. Richard, they're all glowing with your stolen life." The words carved into him, $3 million, decades of blueprints, bridges, and sleepless nights reduced to smoke. His daughter hadn't just betrayed him, she had dismantled the future Alina had entrusted him to guard. He whispered, "No, Sophia loves me. She wouldn't." "She has," Daniel cut in. "And if she suspects you know, she'll bury the last transfers where we'll never find them. Tonight, you must go to dinner. Smile. Play along, let her believe her performance is perfect." The command rattled Richard. Engineer though he was, he had never faced a blueprint of betrayal. His chest tightened, his breath came in ragged gasps. He thought of Sophia as a child, her scraped knees, her laughter echoing in the backyard Alina once filled with roses. Could that same girl have become this predator? Richard sat heavily, jacket in hand, the oak floor beneath him tilting like a bridge losing its supports. But then the old discipline stirred. The part of him that had kept entire skylines standing. Identify the variables. Isolate the weak joints. Design the fix. He rose. In the hall mirror, a man stared back whose eyes had aged a decade in minutes. He practiced the smile he would wear, brittle but passable. He straightened his collar, smoothing grief into something that looked like composure. The house around him was silent, but inside, war drums had begun to beat. He slipped into his jacket, locked the engineer's mask into place, and stepped into the evening. The performance had begun. The driveway curved like a question mark before the house, a low museum of white stone and glass. When Richard stepped out of the car, the air smelled curated, the way a boutique smells expensive without naming a note. The front door opened before he could knock. Victor filled the frame with an easy grin and an embrace pitched one notch too hardy, like a salesman who knows the contract is already signed. "You look sharp, Richard. Big week. Come in, come in." The foyer was a 2-story proclamation of taste. Marble that reflected the chandelier like constellations, a ribbon of staircase in brushed metal, a canvas the size of a modest car, the kind of beauty that never blinked. Sophia appeared at the threshold of the living room in a cream silk dress that caught the light and sent it gliding across the room. She crossed to him, warm hands, cool cheek, a daughter's kiss without the weight of a daughter's worry. "You made it. I was starting to think traffic ate you." "I plan my exits," he said, and smiled the smile he had rehearsed in the mirror. It held. They moved to the sunken living room. Floor-to-ceiling glass opened onto an infinity pool and a city that pretended it had no edges. Victor produced a cut glass decanter and a bottle of sparkling water for Richard, the choreography of a considerate host. Sophia's phone lay face down on the table, vibrating in small, timed tremors. A contact name flashed and died in the reflection on the glass tabletop, not a name at all but a pair of initials and a foreign country code. She did not glance down. Not glancing was the tell. To Mom, Sophia said, raising her glass, to her garden and to everything she taught us about doing things properly. Richard lifted his water, to doing things properly. They ate in a room designed to be photographed. The plates were white and heavy. The roast had a glaze that left a precise sheen. Victor narrated the meal like a travel show, dropping references to suppliers and techniques and who owed him a favor. When he leaned to refill a glass, his cashmere sleeve brushed the light, and Richard saw it. A lipstick smudge the wrong color, a blue-red that had never belonged to Sophia, who favored pale rose. Victor noticed the glance, rotated his wrist, and kept talking with the serene confidence of a man who trusted his set. Between courses, Sophia turned careful and tender, the performance calibrated to the frequency of concern. I have been thinking about your accounts, Dad. Markets are strange. Maybe we rebalance. Fewer growth positions, more long bonds. Let me take the paperwork. It is a headache for you. Richard arranged his face into relief. The trick, Daniel had said, was not to oversell. She will test your need for her. Let her win every small test. He let her win 3. He asked the kind of questions a man asks when paperwork scares him. He nodded at phrases like laddered maturities and reallocation windows. He misremembered a date and apologized for it. Sophia's shoulders softened by a fraction. She poured him more water, a reward for good behavior. Victor drifted toward bigger talk, the kind he preferred. A friends-only placement, nothing on paper yet very quiet. An ocean project. He used the word steward and the word visionary and the word inevitable, words that made failure sound like part of the plan. Richard let the tide of it wash past him. Olivia's map flickered in his head like a blueprint backlit on a table. The shell company, the wires, the fees. He filed away the phrasing. The names Victor dropped like breadcrumbs for people he wanted to impress. Dessert arrived as a sculptural thing that threatened gravity and then obeyed it. When noise fell and the city outside adjusted its lights, Richard chose his moment with the patience of a man who had waited for concrete to cure. I have been thinking, he said lightly, as if speaking to the air. This house of mine is large for one man. Arizona keeps writing postcards in my head. Son, a smaller place I might sell, free up the capital, go somewhere simple. There was the pause, not a full second, not even half, but enough to register as a gap in the transmission. Sophia's eyes remained kind, her mouth curved, but something in the muscles along her jaw flickered, and then the mask sealed. She set down her glass carefully, aligning it with the coaster as if order might slow time. Oh, Dad, she said, and reached for nostalgia like a trained musician reaching for a familiar key. The garden. Do you remember the hydrangeas Mom coaxed back after that frost? Thanksgiving and how the oven ran hot so we had to turn the turkey every 30 minutes. The chalk line I drew on the patio and said no one could cross until I said so. You cannot sell that, not while I can help you carry it. Weaponized memory, the past reissued as a leash. Richard let it loop around his wrist and smiled as if grateful for the tether. You are right, he said. I am only talking out loud. The stairs are longer at night than they used to be. I will not do anything foolish. Sophia exhaled in what read as relief. Victor changed the subject with professional smoothness, a story about a hotel opening that required both of their presence next month. The phone vibrated again. In the reflection, those initials swam and vanished. The initials mattered less than the habit of hiding them. When it was time to leave, Sophia hugged him in the foyer beneath the chandelier that threw expensive stars onto the marble. He felt the corners of the stone bracelet press into his shoulder, a little constellation of debt. She smelled like the curated air and the lemon in her dessert and the memory she had just handed him as if it were a gift instead of a chain. Drive safe, Dad, and do not worry about the accounts. I will swing by tomorrow, pick up the folders, take it off your plate. You are a marvel, said. The words were light. The words were a note pinned to a door that would not be opened again. Outside, the night had sharpened. He stood for a moment with his hand on the car door and let the mask slip just enough to breathe. The house behind him hummed with the quiet electricity of good wiring and bad intentions. He reviewed the tells the way an engineer reviews a site after the first tremor. Alias calls, lipstick in the wrong shade, a panic gap that a child could have jumped. The investment talk threaded with need. He did not start the engine immediately. In the glass of the windshield, he saw his face and the city and the house layered together, transparency over transparency, each truth visible if you learned where to look. The house, he thought, is the end game, not sentiment, capital, the leverage they need to keep the ocean project from drowning them, the one asset they cannot allow me to move. He drove home on familiar streets that felt rearranged. In the hall, he set his keys in the bowl, smoothed the picture frame the way he always did, and walked to the mantel where the ceramic bird waited. The plan assembled itself with the clarity of a load path drawn by a steady hand. He would give them nostalgia. He would give them confusion. He would give them every small thing they wanted until they reached for the one thing he wanted them to try to steal in daylight. He turned off the lights and stood in the quiet. The performance would continue. The design had entered its second draft. The hug had been brittle. The plan was colder. Daniel's office had the soundproof hush of a place where the truth is taken apart with small, precise tools. Books weighted the shelves. A single brass lamp pooled light over a walnut table cleared of everything except a laptop, a legal pad, and a thick binder that looked more like a demolition permit than paperwork. Olivia Carter was already there, hair pulled back, sleeves neatly rolled, eyes clear as glass. She didn't stand to greet Richard. She slid the binder toward him like a surgeon sliding an X-ray across a light box. "This," she said, "is the blueprint." On the first page, the river of his money ran left to right in thin gray arrows that thickened at certain dates, a slow drip from retirement accounts, heavier draws from the brokerage, transfers stacked in neat monthly ridges, then pooled into a single low-visibility business account, Oralia Studio LLC. From there, a scatter of wires bridged the border to a project account at a Mexican bank labeled Mar Azul Resort. Each transfer had a time stamp. Each time stamp matched a purchase he recognized only when Olivia turned the page and let the color in. A Porsche delivery record, a sapphire invoice, a wire receipt tagged consulting. "See the cadence," she said. "Her forgeries keep your quarterly reports smooth while the real statements show a harvest. The amounts change, but the tempo doesn't. People reveal themselves in tempo." Daniel tapped a page with his pencil, and the fingerprints, a burner email used as document control for wire instructions. It routes through a VPN, but the login slips twice to a normal connection. The IP resolves to Sophia's firm on a Tuesday at 9:11 a.m., and to her home network the same evening, not proof by itself, but when you stack it with the rest. Olivia turned another sheet. Names recurred like a bad melody. Consultants paid retainer fees for brand positioning. A line item called management paid to Victor, who had never managed anything except his appetite for other people's money. She laid down a timeline, transparent overlays snapping into place over the base map. Margaret's hospice dates, the first forged PDF, the day Sophia took custody of Richard's bank logins, just to make it easier. The closing on a second property, every overlay aligned with a spike. "A pattern of control," Olivia said, her voice as flat as a level. "After your wife died, she isolated you. She filtered mail, handled bank visits, replaced direct statements with PDFs she compiled for you. She turned access into a favor and favors into custody." Richard stared at the map and felt something colder than rage. Engineers love patterns. Patterns tell you where a structure will fail and how to load it until it does. He traced a finger along the arrows to the rightmost edge where the lines bunched like a storm at the horizon. "What breaks it?" he asked. "Pressure," Olivia answered. "You threaten the one thing they've mentally booked, your house. Mention selling, create a timeline they can't control, they'll make errors. Daniel reached under the table and lifted a small white box. Inside lay a ceramic bird, the kind you might find in a craft shop, glossy, harmless, forgettable. He turned it in his palm, a seam no thicker than a hair split along the belly. Micro recorder, he said. Wide pickup, simple trigger. It sits on your mantle with the other heirloom clutter. Don't talk to it, just let it hear. And Richard, call only from your landline when you can. No sudden changes, no confrontations. You're the man they think you are, grieving, a little overwhelmed, grateful for help. The words felt like a costume. Richard nodded anyway. And the leak? Arthur Gable, Daniel said. He means well. He travels straight from lunch to the world. You tell him you might sell the house and move to Arizona. Say Scottsdale. Say golf and no gutters to clean. He'll carry it to Sophia by dinner. Olivia added, before that, give your daughter a small test. Ask her to help with something basic, insurance forms, beneficiaries. Be confused about a word. Let her feel superior. People who think they are unobserved talk more. Richard placed both hands on the table to steady the tremor in them. You are asking me to humiliate myself. Daniel's mouth softened. We are asking you to win. The rest of the hour was logistics. Daniel drafted a list titled Things You Will Forget on Purpose, misplace a date, conflate a term, ask for signatures twice. Olivia slid across a sheet of danger words to avoid audit, subpoena, investigator, and a mirror list of safe ones, papers, forms, tired. Daniel underlined a final instruction. If she senses a storm, she will run. Your calm is the barometer. When Richard stepped back into daylight, the city looked sharper, edges honed. He drove home without the radio, hearing instead the new vocabulary of war humming in his chest. At the mantel, he set the little bird beside a frame of him and Margaret at the county fair. Sun hats ridiculous, smiles easy. The bird disappeared the way a button disappears on a coat. He tested the switch with a fingernail, listened for the soft, consenting click, and turned it off again. Not yet. He set the kitchen for rehearsal the way he used to set a job site for a stress test. Phone, notes, a stack of insurance mail he had always opened, now left deliberately sealed. He dialed his own voicemail and practiced breath, tried out the frail words that felt like gravel in his mouth. Oh, honey, I get mixed up with these beneficiaries. Your mother used to handle it. He paused, again. I'm sorry to bother you at work. My head's not what it used to be. He hated the line. He kept it. He practiced a sigh, a soft laugh that surrendered. He stood, crossed the room, and laid his wallet on the counter, then picked it up, then set it back down, teaching his hands the choreography of forgetting. He took his keys to the front hall, placed them in the bowl, then removed one and slid it into his jacket's inner pocket. A spare in case he needed to let himself into a life that had been bought with his blood. At the mirror, he worked the face, not the smile he'd rehearsed before dinner, but the looser expression of a man who has learned the world now moves a little too fast. He tilted his head, widened his eyes a fraction. He looked like himself wearing the memory of his father. He dialed Sophia and let it ring long enough to be inconvenient. When she answered, he put pen to paper, wrote the words he was about to say, and then said them as if he had never written anything down in his life. These insurance papers, they use the word contingent. I keep reading it as contented. It's silly, I know. Could you come by? Maybe tomorrow. Her voice turned sweet and managerial all at once. She would be there. Of course she would. He hung up and stared at the ceramic bird. That would be tomorrow. Tonight would be practice for Arthur. He pulled a notebook from a drawer and wrote 3 sentences, then crossed them out and wrote them simpler. Too much house for one man. Sun sounds good. Scottsdale, maybe. He added a 4th line he knew Arthur would love. No gutters. He set the notebook down and went outside. The evening smelled like cut grass and the first tired roses of late summer. Somewhere a neighbor's sprinkler ticked with metronomic patience. Margaret would have teased him for the theatrics, then helped him stage every prop. He smiled without meaning to. The humiliation felt less like surrender the longer he looked at it. It felt like scaffolding, temporary, ugly, necessary, around a structure under repair. He went back inside, placed the wallet deliberately in the wrong jacket, and left the right one on the chair he would use tomorrow when his daughter sat at his table and explained his life to him in smaller words. The bird on the mantel watched him in its dumb, glossy way. The house was quiet enough to hear the pencil marks he'd left on Daniel's list. He put a glass on the counter, filled it, and drank. Then he set the glass down and practiced the sound of a man who has not been sleeping. The performance would be convincing because every lie would be mortared with a truth. He was grieving, he was tired, and he would not break. The rumor Richard seeded through Arthur spread faster than wildfire. By the following evening, Sophia's call came, her tone clipped and panicked beneath the practiced warmth. "Dad, Arthur said you're selling the house? Scottsdale. That can't be true. Tell me you're joking." Richard let silence linger, then released a sigh designed for performance. "It's just an idea, honey. Big house, too many stairs. Arizona sunshine might be easier on these old bones. Don't worry. I'll think about it." Her exhale crackled through the phone, sharp as broken glass. "Promise me, Dad. Don't do anything rash. We'll talk soon." That was exactly what he wanted, a mind tangled in panic. The next day, Richard executed the wallet in your car excuse. Victor wasn't home. Sophia had left for a brunch. The mansion smelled faintly of expensive candles, lemon, and cedarwood. On the kitchen counter sat an iPad, screen glowing from a half-done sink. Richard's hand hovered for a moment, then tapped. What he found reframed everything. Encrypted chats between Sophia and a man named Marco Reyes filled the screen. The resort's money handler. Messages that mixed wire confirmations with hotel suite numbers. Photographs blurred at the edges but undeniable. Sophia, half-lit by lamplight, smiling in intimacy not meant for a father's eyes. Richard's stomach twisted, a hollow ache of betrayal layered upon betrayal. Then another thread, Victor. Not to Sophia, but to Lena, her assistant. Screenshots of internal pitch decks, schematics forwarded in secrecy. Notes about leverage and timing. And photographs, Victor in a hotel lounge, Lena's lipstick staining the rim of his glass. This wasn't a marriage. It was a shell hollowed out by greed and infidelity. A business arrangement draped in family portraits. Richard forced himself to breathe to save outrage for later. He slid the iPad back, leaving no trace. The picture was clearer now. Sophia wasn't just siphoning his accounts. She was selling intimacy for access. Victor wasn't just complicit, he was compromised. That evening, he planted Daniel's disguised recorder inside the birdhouse on his mantle. The ceramic sparrow's painted eyes now hid a black square lens no bigger than a seed. Days later, Sophia and Victor arrived, polished and smiling, with a leather-bound folder full of projections. "Dad," Sophia cooed, "we only want what's best for you. Let's talk about the numbers again." Richard nodded, feigning fatigue. Halfway through Victor's pitch about market timing, he pushed himself up. "I'll make tea, my head's spinning." In the kitchen, he let the tap run, porcelain clinking deliberately as he set cups. Behind the wall, the masks dropped. Victor's voice first, low, desperate. "We need another injection, Sophia. The investors are circling. Without cash, Mar Azul collapses." Then Sophia, voice stripped of silk. "He won't sell. He's confused, weaker than I thought, but stubborn. This Arizona fantasy proves it." "Victor, what if he calls a realtor tomorrow? What then?" Silence stretched, broken at last by Sophia's words, cold, measured, surgical. "Then we take the next step. I'll get Dr. Keller to issue a stronger statement, conservatorship that will end his freedom. Once I have that, every asset is ours." Richard gripped the counter, knuckles white. His daughter wasn't just stealing, she was planning to erase him. But this time, her arrogance was recorded. The petition landed on Daniel's desk like a gauntlet. Conservatorship of Richard Hale. The language was immaculate in its cruelty, recent cognitive decline, erratic decision-making, fixation on liquidating the primary residence, risk of destitution. They'd taken his bait and sewn it into a straitjacket. Daniel read it twice, then smiled the way an engineer smiles at a hairline crack no one else can see. "Good," he said softly. "She's dragged a private fraud into a public forum. Now she has to speak under oath." Olivia arrived with the finished map of the crime bound in matte black. When she opened it, the courtroom that did not yet exist seemed to bloom on the table. Page after page of cold choreography, withdrawals marching in neat columns. A Porsche title issued the week a retirement tranche vanished. A jeweler's invoice for a bracelet the color of a winter river. Airline itineraries to Cancun that rose and fell with the bank balances. On the facing page, identical inflows to Oralaya Studio LLC, then out again into Mar Azul Resort, each wire labeled with a careful lie: consulting, licensing, management. Kickbacks, Olivia said, voice flat. If you squint at the ledger, it looks like business. If you listen to the cadence, it's theft set to a metronome. They built the counter case with the patience of carpenters, subpoenas drafted, custodian of records affidavits queued, a motion to compel production of the original bank statements, not Sophia's PDFs, a short, deadly brief on fiduciary breach and elder financial exploitation, every statute cited with page and line. Daniel rehearsed questions out loud, trimming adjectives, tightening screws. Mr. Lane, when you say management fee, do you mean the payment that arrived the same day you posted photos from the Porsche delivery bay? Then Olivia found the deeper crack. Margaret's insurance, she said, dropping a slim folder onto the table. I was cross-checking for completeness. The policy names Ethan's Education Trust as beneficiary. 3 weeks before she died, a change of beneficiary form was filed, primary changed to Sophia Hale. She slid over a high-resolution scan. I pulled a dozen of Margaret's signatures from the last 10 years. Checks, DMV, the house refi. This one is wrong, not shaky from illness, careful. The pressure is uneven. The downstrokes hesitate. Whoever made it was drawing a memory, not writing a name. Daniel's pencil stopped. We'll need an expert who doesn't blink. Enter Michael Torres, a document examiner whose reports read like music without joy. Under a magnifier and raking light, he circled what the eye wanted to forgive. Blunt beginnings, tremorless tremors, pen lifts where Margaret had never lifted. It's a likely simulation, he said, tapping the loop of the G. A healthy hand imitating a frail one. The horror expanded to fit the room. It wasn't just that Sophia had bled a living father. She might have stolen from a dying mother, diverting a last gift away from a grandson to herself. Daniel's face went still. We add criminal referral language, he said, already writing. Forgery, insurance, fraud. In the hospice archives, another envelope surfaced, unindexed, hand-addressed, sealed with the old-fashioned faith of glue. To Richard. Open if I don't come home. The nurse who'd kept it found it only because Olivia asked a question no one ever asks. Was Margaret the sort who left letters? Richard opened it alone in his kitchen at dusk, where the light goes soft and old houses tell the truth. The paper held Margaret's smell for a second and then let it go. The first lines were a river of apology, switching banks, doubling back. Decades ago, she wrote, there had been a single, shattering mistake. A winter of grief, a man who was not you, a door I never should have opened. She had built a life with Richard out of vows and repairs, and the repairs had held, but she had always feared the crack beneath. There is a possibility that Sophia is not your biological daughter. She had meant to tell him and never found a door that didn't feel like fire. He felt the words hit and pass through, leaving a sound behind them like the thrum of a bridge in high wind. For a long time, he read nothing but the white space between sentences. He thought of Sophia at 7 with a tooth missing, at 12 with a ribbon in her hair, at 23 in a dress no one could afford, of every time Margaret had taken his hand under the table when he said the wrong thing and been forgiven without a trial. He set the letter down and pressed his palms to the wood. There was a mercy in facts. Love is chosen, trust is earned. He had chosen the first long ago and would not unchoose it now. Biology was a blueprint. Fatherhood was maintenance. But trust, the daily contract that keeps a house from creaking apart, was gone, and in its place the math of consequences would stand. He folded the letter and returned it to its envelope. He did not call Daniel. He did not call anyone. For 10 minutes, he listened to the refrigerator hum and the tick of the dining room clock and let the hot storm pass without breaking anything he would regret. Then he filed the letter with his will, not as ammunition, as weather. Morning brought the practical. Daniel added Torahs to the witness list and a motion to sequester Sophia's devices. Olivia drafted a chart that braided 3 timelines: the drains, the luxuries, the lies. At the top, she wrote, "Every theft buys a performance." Richard slid the bird recorder into his pocket and felt its tiny weight like a promise. He called Sophia to thank her for helping with the forms and made his voice smaller at the edges so she would lean in. He called Arthur for lunch and picked a diner with bad coffee and good acoustics. By afternoon, process servers were moving. Bank custodians confirmed receipt. The court set a hearing date on the conservatorship that came too soon for Sophia and just soon enough for him. Daniel rearranged stacks until the table looked like a city viewed from above, streets of precedent, squares of evidence, a river of exhibits labeled and numbered. "Last thing," Daniel said and slid across a single page. "Affidavit, Richard Hale." "It says you're competent," he explained. "It says you understand your finances and your desire to sell the house is rational. We keep it short. Let Dr. Hannah Moore carry the symphony, you provide the theme." Richard signed and watched the ink dry. Outside, the day shifted from bright to the color of metal, and he thought of all the structures he'd kept from falling: overpasses and water towers, a library with a roof that wanted to twist in storms. This was the same work done with different tools. Find the load, follow the stress, add bracing where the truth would otherwise snap. He left Daniel's office as the first streetlights blinked awake. In the glass, he caught his reflection layered over the city and thought, with a steadiness that surprised him, "I will not destroy myself with this truth. I will end their lies." He went home, watered Margaret's roses, and slept without dreams. Tomorrow, the war would change theaters. The levers were in place. All that remained was to pull. The courtroom was paneled in mahogany, air heavy with silence. Richard adjusted his tie, aware that every eye in the chamber carried judgment. Across the aisle, Sophia sat poised in cream silk, her face arranged into concern. Beside her, Victor whispered something into her ear, but his eyes betrayed strain. Their attorney, a silver-haired performer, rose first. He painted Richard as a man unraveling, a grieving widower sliding into senility. He spoke of irrational ideas of liquidating property, of confusion over simple finances, of endangering himself without his daughter's care. A pair of witnesses came forward, Sophia's friends, investors in Victor's sinking project, claiming Richard forgot conversations, acted erratic, obsessed over Arizona fantasies. Each word was another brushstroke in the portrait of incompetence. When it was Daniel's turn, the atmosphere shifted. He moved with calm precision, not a hint of panic. His first witness was Dr. Hannah Moore, the court-appointed psychiatrist. With a steady voice, she dismantled the accusations. Richard's cognition was sharp, his financial reasoning methodical, his desire to downsize entirely rational. Her conclusion: "He is among the most cognitively sound clients I have evaluated this year." A ripple spread across the benches. Sophia's shoulders stiffened. Then Olivia took the stand. Projected on the courtroom screen were the charts and timelines she had built. Month-by-month withdrawals from Richard's accounts. Identical inflows into Oralia Studio LLC. Payments marked as consulting. A Porsche, jewelry, international trips, all aligning perfectly with missing funds. The numbers were merciless. Daniel leaned on the crescendo. He produced the small recorder disguised as a birdhouse. He played the audio, Richard's weary voice, Victor's whispering panic about the resort bleeding money, and Sophia's words, sharp and cold. "We need full control." Gasps cut through the air. The judge leaned forward, expression hardening. Michael Torres, the handwriting expert, followed. He declared the amendment of Margaret's insurance a forgery, strokes too slow, pressure inconsistent. He confirmed the payout funneled directly into Sophia's personal account weeks after Margaret's death, and no record of the Ethan Education Trust existed. Daniel wasn't finished. With deliberate steps, he unveiled sealed exhibits. Sophia's encrypted chat logs with Marco Reyes, the resort's money handler, wire instructions, affectionate notes, hotel suite numbers, collusion and intimacy entwined. Next came bank screenshots tying Victor and Lena, Sophia's assistant, to quiet skims off contracts. The gallery buzzed like a hive of hornets. Under crushing weight, Victor broke. He admitted the resort was a financial graveyard, that Sophia orchestrated the forged reports, the diversions, the manipulations. His words cracked the façade Sophia had fought to hold. She sagged in her chair, mask gone. The judge's ruling fell like stone. Conservatorship denied. Immediate freeze of Sophia and Victor's assets. Referral to the district attorney for criminal investigation. Sophia's composure shattered in open court. Tears, gasps, fragments of pleas fell from her lips, but no mask could shield her now. Richard watched, not with triumph, but with the cold clarity of survival. The daughter who betrayed him sat exposed, stripped of illusion. Around them, the machinery of law closed in. Justice had begun. By late spring, the storm had emptied itself and left the air clean. The headlines had shrunk from front page to inside column. The courthouse buzz turned into clerk chatter and docket numbers. Criminal charges proceeded. Sophia made bail on a bond signed by a man who did not meet her eyes. Victor cooperated, then disappeared into the gray anonymity of a cooperating witness. Marco Reyes vanished offshore. His last ping a marina camera where a cap and sunglasses are all the law could name. Warrants fanned out like paper birds. Lena flipped, sat in a windowless room and traded screenshots for sunlight. Richard did not haunt the courthouse. He kept Margaret's roses alive with hands that now shook only when he set the puners down. He learned the particular patience of tea that wants to cool and soil that wants one more day of water. He mended a sagging gate and replaced a hinge no one but Margaret had ever noticed. The house, once an echo chamber for grief, became a workshop for quiet repairs. On a soft morning, Ethan arrived with the awkward grace of 16-year-old limbs that had grown too fast. He stood by the garden bed where the roses had decided to forgive the winter. They discussed nothing for a while. The weather, a geometry quiz, a joke about how many thorns a single flower can afford. Richard watched the boy's face and saw no ledgers, only a life that had waited to begin. In Daniel's office, restitution orders took shape under Olivia's steady hand. Money does not turn back into time, but it can be taught to carry what it can. A necklace here, a Porsche title there, lots that went to auction and numbers that finally stopped bleeding, each line a small return from the long robbery. Title transfers corrected themselves on county records. Liens unwound. The paper truth reasserted the physical one. Richard Reed initialed, signed, never rushing, never swallowing a clause he hadn't tasted. He wrote a victim impact statement that was cool, precise, devastating. Not a sermon and not a howl, an engineer's report on a collapsed span. He listed dates and balances and what grief sounds like when weaponized. He did not ask the court to hate his daughter. He asked the court to see her. He described a conservatorship petition as an attempt to transform a father into inventory. He ended with a single line: dignity, like steel, fails when you cut too many corners. The judge read it twice. The Real Education Trust reappeared on paper and then in the world, built this time with locks that did not depend on charm. Its name was the same, the Ethan Hale Education Trust, but its spine had been replaced with rebar. Daniel crafted the provisions. Olivia tested them against bad weather. Richard chose the trustee not for warmth but for angle of repose. He signed, and the pen did not quiver. He sold the big house on his timetable, not the courts, not panics. He let the market take its breath and then accepted a sensible offer from a family whose children measured the backyard in strides. He walked room to room on the last day and thanked the walls for holding. He left a note in the kitchen drawer for a stranger. The south hinge on the pantry door sticks when it rains. A little oil, a little patience. He moved south to a small place where sun found him every morning. Not exile, choice. A porch big enough for 2 chairs. A kitchen that did not try to impress. A neighbor who waved without expectation. The first night he slept as if someone had given back a borrowed hour. In the middle of that new summer, Ethan visited. They sat at the table with a manila envelope between them. Richard slid it across the wood. "Your grandmother wanted the first good door open for you," he said. "We had to build it twice. The second one is stronger." Ethan opened the documents, read the title, and then looked up so quickly it was almost a flinch. Richard told him the financial truth in full, how charm had been used like a crowbar, how numbers can lie until you make them read out loud. He did not tell him the biology. Fatherhood had not been a blood test. It had been midnight rides to emergency rooms and cardboard castles in living rooms and 100 small fixes no one else could have seen needed doing. He chose mercy where vengeance would feel like winning. "Will she go to prison?" Ethan asked, voice careful, as if facts could break. "I don't know," Richard said, and the honesty was a kind of victory. "The law will do what it can. We did what we must." They signed the last page together, Ethan in ink that trembled, Richard in ink that did not. Outside, a monsoon cloud broke its promise on the far horizon and then changed its mind. The light in the room became something you could drink. When Ethan stood to go, Richard placed a hand on his shoulder. "If anyone tries to take your name apart," he said, "you let the record answer. Don't shout, don't hurry. Just put the truth on the table and let it weigh what it weighs." On the porch, the day smelled like dust and orange peel. Richard watched his grandson walk to the car and felt the click of a well-designed machine finishing its cycle. The revenge had never been rage. It was records, patience, the unflinching light of proof. That night, he watered a single rose until the soil stopped drinking. He sat with the quiet and discovered it was no longer absence but space. He closed his eyes and saw every bridge he had ever built still standing. In the morning, he would oil a hinge that didn't ask to be oiled and write a letter that didn't ask to be sent. The ledger of his life, for once, balanced. That's where this story lands, not in bitterness, but in balance. When greed tried to write his ending, he answered with records, patience, and law. Houses can be sold, accounts can be rebuilt, but dignity only holds when you refuse to cut corners. What would you have done in his place? Tell every truth or protect the ones that still deserve mercy? Share your thoughts below. If this hit home like the video, subscribe to Cheating Stories 7 and turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter. Your comment might shape our next story. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.